Hello everyone, Clifford Bennett, Chief Economist, ACY Securities. I trust you had a fantastic weekend and you have a surprisingly good week ahead of you. All the best in all regards. We've seen a tremendous upheaval in the Ukraine conflict, and we have to mention it because it's having an immediate impact on markets in the Asian morning. There is no doubt about that. And that is that the Wagner Group, or the leader of the Wagner Group, decided that he, as a major warlord, could perhaps be, I don't know, ruler of Russia, but he was badly mistaken. Also, his troops followed his orders, but they weren't perhaps quite as committed as he would like. And the Belarus president has intervened to give safe harbor to the leader of the Wagner Group so that he wasn't arrested in Russia. And this seems to have completely deflated the situation. So we had sort of like a totally left field event, which was massive. Talk of mutiny and the overthrow of Putin, and it was never anywhere near any of that, of course. But, you know, it was sort of the seed for that story to spread. And so what we have now is an army of nearly 50,000, and they are, you know, they're called mercenaries, but they are Russian troops. And they will now, as they were going to be anyway, incorporated into the Russian army, and that's what was upsetting the leader of the Wagner Group, that he was going to lose that. Remember, he used to be Putin's chef, and then he started doing arms deals, and then he started organizing military groups. The Americans have the same thing. Every country has the same sorts of people these days. And then he's gradually grown in size, and he's had his group of soldiers had great success. He's had great success from their point of view in Ukraine. And I think there's a bit of a trading lesson here too. Don't get overly confident. Not everything that's going well is because of you. And if we can remember to be humble when we're at the peak of our success or power, that's how we get to keep that success or power. And that's why so many philosophies and religions talk about humility. It's how you maintain the things that you achieve. If you decide to start thinking that it's all about you, you'll find you quickly lose those things. So that's exactly what's happened here. Obviously, it's far more complex than that. But in terms of market impact, we're seeing gold kick up, we're seeing oil kick up, as they should. Now, it could be that this is a positive for stocks in that some people will no doubt over the next 24 to 72 hours, maybe even over the next 3 weeks, write lots of articles and do lots of TV shows about how this means that Putin's losing his power, that it's the thin edge of the wedge, that it means the war in Ukraine will be over sooner, and that would definitely be good for stocks. So it could have a positive impact on market sentiment, there's no doubt about that, but the reality, unfortunately for the West, is that what this means is that army stays in place probably in Ukraine. I mean, if the army were to move with the Wagner leader to Belarus, that would be terrible for Ukraine because they'd be 2/3 of the distance closer over a couple of weeks to Kiev than they are now. What the West does not want is the disbanding of that Wagner army so that it goes to Belarus, because then you will have a Russian army looking to redeem itself once the national heroes of Russia, who then became treasonous, and with Kiev just around the corner almost. And if it would allow the opening of two fronts. So that's not something the West would like. But I do think rather than that scenario, what we're going to have is the Wagner army becomes a part of the Russian army. And the storyline in Russia is that that was what was being planned, and hence the Wagner leader's sort of rebellion, because he was trying to maintain control of his army. So I think going forward, it is a positive for Ukrainian troops on the ground in the short to medium term. Unfortunately, and I'm just an objective observer, I don't think this will speed up the end of the war. And Russian positions remain very entrenched. So I think probably in the long run, we're looking at a stalemate in terms of territory. But in the short term, a lot of people will want to believe what they want to believe. Oh, Putin's going. But the thing is, for the West point of view, again, you do not want Putin to leave power, because the people who would take over are saying far more hardline things about Kiev. The former Prime Minister is saying, Medvedev is saying that, Kiev should be bombed off the face of the map. So there are other people in Moscow that Putin's actually a moderate of. So we actually don't want, I don't think, Putin removed from the leadership. So just be aware that this is not a one man's war against Kiev. So a lot of Russians are very upset, and we should be very careful to assess what would happen in the future with that reality in our minds, because otherwise we're just not going to come up with the correct outlook for what's going to happen. As you know, I'm someone who calls it as I think it is. We're always with the grain of salt of I could well be totally wrong, because let's face it, what do any of us really know at this point in time? But it is the case, I did write that essay 2 weeks before the invasion saying 5 reasons why Russia will invade. So, looking at things objectively, not always as how we would like to see them, is a way to more accurately predict the future, I think. So at this point, I'm seeing potential for media spin on this to persist, even though the situation as far as Russia's concerned is probably completely deflated already, except that its troops, it has Wagner Group troops that have moved back from the front lines. There's no doubt about that. It's already been stated very clearly by the Defense Ministry and Russian commanders, generals, that there will be no repercussions against the troops of the Wagner Group, and that they see it as their leader, under great stress because it's been, going for so long in Ukraine, losing the plot a little bit. And so I think we're going to see a very quick de-escalation of the situation. I think it's probably already de-escalated, and we're going to see those troops very likely, in fact, I would say almost definitely, moving back to the front lines against Ukraine, along with other Russian forces. And, I think that's why I think there'll be a territorial stalemate, whether we like it or not. But that remains to be seen. So market impact, yes, there is a market impact. Will it last? I think it could last in the gold and oil markets, because those markets were ready to move higher. They've been oversold now. We're ready to move higher. And in fact, in New York trading, it showed signs of stability to maybe kicking up a little bit in any case. Whereas the equity markets already had, that 8-9 week bull run and experienced a little bit of buyer exhaustion last week, as well as people realizing that the US economy remains in serious trouble, and central banks around the world, Western central banks, are going to continue to hike rates even as their economies crumble, making the risk of a triple recession, if you could call it that, of the United States, Europe and the UK very much on the cards at this point, as Germany is already in recession and several other EU members have negative growth at this point. So a lot of economic downside potential. So any lift in the equity market on the back of those developments regarding Russia over the weekend are probably not going to be sustained beyond a few days to a week, if that, because I do believe that there will be a lot of major fund managers in the world who'd already started selling, who will see any rally from this, even on the day perhaps, as an opportunity for liquidity to sell into. So I remain one of the risk-off sort of scenario, and I do think, as I've advised for a little while now, not to trust that rally and to look to play defensively, but perhaps aggressively in some markets such as gold and oil. Remember, I took my foot off the accelerator on my oil view for a little bit of time. I'm starting to ease that back on. Mixed signals. I think there's going to be continued supply disruption regarding the oil market. I mean, Russia sells a lot of oil to Turkey, which is then on-sold to NATO members and Ukraine at this point. And it's not beyond the imagination that at some point that oil flow could be reduced by one party's, either side's actions or decisions. So that's why I'm a little bit bullish on oil for the geopolitical tensions. but I'm a little bit bearish on oil for the slowing global economy, which will be the case. There's no doubt about that. As China will remain strong. I think Asia is a robust economic region that's going to have a lot less volatility, a lot less economic volatility than either the United States or Europe and the UK moving forward. Things look particularly bad for the UK too, I would like to mention. Thanks very much. Clifford Bennett, a lot to think about at the start of this week, Chief Economist, ACY Securities.